Hey, what's up everybody? In this video we're going to look over my TAL RASHA build for 2.2. Kind of a revisit of my older builds, but now things have changed. Now you actually have to have castable spells to proc the damage increase. Now the meteors still proc off of different types of elemental damage that could be tied into just a single skill. Now to get that full 600% weapon damage, you actually need 4 different elemental types that must be cast and also damaging. So right off the bat, let's get to the skills that I'm using. For this particular one, I'll probably come out with different skill sets for this build. So this is just what I'm using right now. Okay, my primary is Electrocute for lightning damage, using Chain Lightning for extra targets to be hit. I'm also using Mycon's Ball of Hate. That allows Electrocute to hit 2 other people. Or, well, no, hit the same person twice, sorry. Hydra with Arcane Hydra for my secondary. Using Arcane damage for this, I could use, say, Lightning and then switch Electrocute to Fire damage. That's the whole thing, is it's a very malleable set. Other ones you don't have very much room to move with. With this one you could change it up quite a bit. So anyway, using this for low arcane power also that attacks while I'm doing other things. So very good for TAL RASHA set is the Hydra itself. I'm using Black Hole with Blazar for my fire damage. Now for the stacking, I'm really only stacking 2 to 3 stacks and then using the 4th stack with Black Hole for elites. Because really, once you get to the 3rd stack, you're mowing everything down. This is Torment 6, by the way, and I will do a Rift after I'm done with all this. But really, you don't... 2 stacks will typically take everything out. Larger groups, you might want to get 3, and then for the toughest enemies, 4 stacks, of course. So Blazar, just for the sheer damage output that this has, essentially 1400% weapon damage just on a single cast. And then finally for my cold, Blizzard with Snowbound. I use Snowbound just because of low arcane power. This whole build is actually very low. The highest that I'll be spending is 20, and the lowest 10. Hydra's right at 15, so I do not need any arcane regen besides 3 on critical hit off of my offhand. So my other 2 are Conjuration spells. Magic Weapon with Force Weapon just for 20% increased damage, and then Familiar with Spark Flint for 10% increased damage, and a little Fireball that gives me a little extra damage. So those are just primarily for damage increase, and there's actually quite a bit of damage increases you'll see as I go. My passive skills, Audacity for 15% increased damage for enemies that are close 15 yards. Elemental Exposure is a great one with this build because well, TAL RASHA is set. Since you're using all 4, or most likely you will, you don't have to, but I am. Since I'm going to be using all 4, each time I use any of them, I'll increase my damage by 5%. So when I do use all 4, it's an additional 20% damage increase. Arcane Dynamo, I'm using this because I will be using Electrocute quite a bit. So after I use it 5 times, my next Hydra, Blizzard, or Black Hole will deal an additional 60% damage. So that's yet again another damage increase. And then finally Blur for defense, since this will be Torment 6. So let's get to the gear. Now I have 6 pieces of the TAL RASHA set. Instead of having the Ring of Royal Grandeur, which allows for 5, I just decided to go with all 6 and then use a ring that I found that is actually new that ties very well with this. But before I get to that, I have the helm, which is ancient, and then I have the chest, hands, belt, legs, and necklace or amulet. So those are the pieces of TAL RASHA. Really nothing special going on there. Chest increases attack speed, and everything else is pretty standard. More geared towards defense. I did re-roll for a lot of defense on some of the pieces. And then for my shoulders, I have the Ancient Pauldrons of the Skeleton King. Yeah, that's just in case I die, I have a chance to come back to life. And then also fear everybody. The shoulders are kind of something that they haven't touched on too much as far as being a good offensive slot. So that's what I'm using for right now, just mainly for stats and defense. My wrists are slave bonds just for the 5 primary stats that they give you. The additional movement speed helps with making my primary, or making my paragon able to use more intellect. That's just kind of a slight damage boost with that, because I don't have to max out my, or use a lot of points to max out my movement speed. And then for my rings, I have Unity on one, and then my follower has Unity also, and then her focus allows her not to die, so that effectively reduces my damage by half. And then for my other ring, I just found this. I really lucked out. I forgot about it until it dropped. The convention of elements allows you to gain 150 to 200%. I rolled a 177, so middle ground. 177% increased damage to a single element for 4 seconds. This effect rotates through the elements available by your class in the following order. For me, it'll be arcane, cold, fire, and lightning. And as you see down here, this little buff, it'll just randomly go through and increase damage for a single element. So when I'm casting anything, there's a chance that I'm going to be doing 177% more damage. So on top of my TAL RASHA 6-piece, if you don't know what it is, here it is. It'll increase the damage that I'm already increasing here. So the 2-piece, of course, is dropping meteors like it did before. So of course you got one of each type, each with an 8-second cooldown. So it'll be dropping a lot of meteors, especially if you're using all 4 elements. The 4-piece set bonus, of course, is new. It increases your resistance to that damage type by 100% for 6 seconds. So this also ties in with the 6-piece. So whenever you use, say, fire, you'll increase your resistance and you'll also increase your overall damage. So each one you go through, you'll be more resistant and you'll be doing huge amounts of damage. This build is crazy once you get up to 3 stacks, and 4 stacks is essentially where you're melting everything. If it's, a really, you got some decent gear to go with it. But it would be absolutely great just having the set alone and your other gear was just normal, it didn't really matter. This set would still be that powerful. So it's already beyond Firebird as far as I'm concerned. So for my legendaries, I have Pain Enhancer, of course, just a dot damage physical. And then it's rank 25, so I get Blood Frenzy, which increases my attack speed for nearby bleeding enemies. And then my other legendary gem is Gem of Efficacious Toxin. It's just poison damage, about 325% weapon damage per second. But it's also rank 25, so that increases my damage again by another 10% once I poison somebody with it, from all sources, so that's very good. My feet, Ice Climbers, great boots. I haven't really used them. It took me a long time just to get these, and great boots because you can't be frozen or immobilized, which is huge in this game. I mean, you can still be walled, but debuffs will not affect you. So I highly recommend using these if you can. There are other boots out there though too. They're slowly coming out with better boots, especially for very specific skill or classes, such as the Barbarian. For my weapon, I'm using Thunder Fury Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. I know there's better ones out there, but since this is ancient and also it procs quite often, it does a lot of damage. I mean, there's other weapons with more, but with this being able to have great distance and also hit 5 enemies regularly, and also have the CC of just slowing their attack speed and movement speed by 30%. Overall, this is a great weapon for really any build, any class, anything that uses a melee weapon. And then for my offhand, I'm using Mycon's Ball of Hate to go with Electrocute. It allows Electrocute to hit an enemy twice. Typically, it does not do that. So that's all my gear. Let me buff up and we'll go over the stats real fast. My sheet damage is 1.75 million. That will ramp up, but the funny thing is that once you get these stacks going with the TAL RASHA, it does not show up here. My toughness 13 million. It's actually kind of high because some of my rolls, but also that is not going to be really enough to survive on tier 6 without Unity. This is a solo build. If I was to use this, I'd have to be a lot more careful in groups because I would lose my follower unless somebody else was carrying Unity, but usually people do not do that for multiplayer. So my attack speed increase is 16%, but I also have attack speed increase on my Thunder Fury, which of 7, so that should be up at 23, but weapons do not show up on your sheet damage for some weird reason. Yeah, I'll show you right here. See? So it does not move, but I still get that bonus. Critical hit chance, very high, 55%. it's pretty hard to get any higher than that. I could probably get it up over 60, but there's no real reason to. Critical hit damage, I wish it was up over 400, but that's pretty feasible. 500 is great. 400 is pretty damn good. Usually I don't try to get lower than 350 unless I have a very specific build, which takes a lot of pieces. Area damage, 50% from Paragon and 20% from Micah's Ball of Hate reroll. So that's decent, you know, especially for groups. Nothing really special with defense. Life, I do have 605,000 life, so that's pretty good for a wizard. Life per second, life per hit, life per kill. I do have a decent amount of these, so when I am doing my thing, I will be able to regenerate my health very rapidly, especially for how quickly I can kill enemies. So this is a farming build by any mean for Torment 6. That's the crazy thing, is that before I could not farm with this type of build. It would be a little slower. Now it's not a problem at all with how they buffed it with this 6th piece set. And one thing I want to talk about is when you proc the 100 or the damage increase from the 6-piece bonus, what happens is it'll initiate a cooldown, a 6-second cooldown for the first element that you use, and then if you use another one, it'll refresh that cooldown to 6 seconds. But that does not mean you could go back and recast the one that initiated it. It will not set it on a cooldown. So you kind of have to time it so that each one successively stacks to get the most out of it, or cast them all really fast and then get that 600% increase. And then after that 6 seconds is up, if you don't refresh it, what'll happen is it'll fall off and then it'll restart. Now, essentially what this means is you always have 150% increased damage, because the instant it falls off, you'll use something and it'll go right back up to 150%. And so the way that you play can add time to it, or also stack it very fast, depending on how you want to play, which makes it very fun. It puts instead of just clicking a single button or two like you normally would, with a lot of very powerful builds that are very focused. On this, you can pick what you want to do, and then also how much you want to ramp up your damage. So it is kind of a learning curve. At times you might not have very much damage, because it'll fall off pretty steep and you won't realize it unless you're watching your buffs. And then also with Convention of Elements, that's kind of a roulette wheel of sometimes you'll get insane amounts of damage. So that's kind of, you know, that's sometimes you'll see me doing 250 million damage on certain moves once I get 4 stacks on elites. And when you're doing that kind of damage, nothing lasts, not even rift bosses. So that's about it for the build and everything like that. So I am going to do a rift. It's already ready to go. And as you'll see, it is very easy to go through this with what I have. So I'm buffed, and what happens is, what I do is always have my Hydra up wherever I'm at. Always cast that, so that's always giving me the 150% buff. Use my electrocute, and then usually I only keep up 2 to 3 stacks. That's all it really takes. So a lot of times I'll just cast my Hydra and then my Blizzard, usually whenever I see an enemy or whatever. And the crazy thing is, you don't have to hit the enemy to receive the buff. You just have to cast it. So that's what's nice about it. You can use it, like, say, an armor or something. That will buff it, but there's no real reason to. So as you can see, the damage ramps up very quickly once I start going through my skills. Right now I'm talking a little too much, so I'm not exactly playing the way I normally do. But yeah, it's very easy to use this build, just as long as you remember to cycle through your skills. Now you can really use anything that you want for the damage amplification, just as long as it is an attack and it is castable. You cannot use passive skills. Well, I might as well just go down to the second one. You cannot use passive skills like you're proccing the meteors. What you have to do is you actually have to have individual skills that you have to cast, and they do damage. So it took me a little bit to figure that out. I thought that I could make, 2 or 3 come off of one click. You can't do that. You can proc your meteors that way, but you cannot proc your damaging moves, or your damage increase from it. So here I'll get everything going, and everything dies very rapidly. So when you have everything off cooldown, if you do have cooldowns, just start clicking one by one through it. You'll have all the damage that you need, and then on top of that, with this ring, I might even, or one of those skills will be very, very powerful, because just the math would be insane to try to figure out exactly how much I'm doing. Really, I just have the damage numbers up. So on the low end, 300 or 3 million crits with my primary, and then everything's above that. So, oh, got a legendary axe. Looks like, what was that, Thrasher? I can't remember. So, very, very good build. I highly recommend getting it. I have not yet pieced together the slow time build, the newest build. But once I do, of course, I'm going to try that out. Really haven't been too into slow time because of the cooldown and more of a defensive quality of it. But now that it's become offensive, it will be nice to see how that works out. It's cool that they're trying out new things. This just seems like a very slow rate that they have been. So there I used everything. Everything died very quickly. Especially with those meteors that drop. They do huge amounts of damage once they're buffed up. So it's just very hard. A little bit of lag there. It's very hard to know when they're going to drop. So essentially you just rely on them for random damage increases. So really there's so many random chances of you doing huge amounts of damage with this build that you're just going to wipe everything out very quickly. So I do like it. I do recommend it. And one of the major reasons why I recommend it is because you get to change so much up. You go all cooldowns with cooldown reductions for all your skills, just as long as you're trying to, use all the elements, which you don't have to really. If you don't want to, you could only go with, or you can only go with one if you just go in for the damage buff, and you only need so much. But this way, it makes it more interesting to play instead of just using the same skill over and over again. This way, you're trying to think of when and where to use skills and how to. Ooh man. I don't take those explosions very well. How to effectively use your damage increases and use them properly so that you're always buffing yourself. So, but really, in the end, if you don't care to do that, it doesn't really matter. Just remember to go through your stuff and you will be doing huge amounts of damage. So, sometimes I forget when I'm playing to use certain skills such as Blizzard. And then when you do forget them, you'll notice it too. Things won't die as quickly as you would think. So then you're like, oh yeah, so I forgot to use that. Then shit dies real fast. So I did use this on multiplayer, but then now Torment 6 is kind of trivial. Here, we'll see what this Rift Guardian can do against me. So we'll just hit her up with everything. And that's about that. Sometimes I could actually clear the Rift boss depending on what I have up at the time as far as cooldowns in just a few seconds. That actually took longer than I'm used to. But overall, just a very cool build and very easy to go through everything. Just use the skills that you want, and that's about it, and then you will be wiping shit out very fast. The defense would be the biggest problem with this build. You will want to go maximum damage, and you don't have to. Once you reach 600% damage increase, you're already beyond the 400%, well, even a 450% damage increase using 3 stacks, you're beyond the shrine that gives you 400%. And that is a very powerful shrine. Whenever you get that, you immediately notice it. So with this build, even the weakest moves, I mean, Electrocute is very weak. Even with that, at 450%, you're wiping shit out pretty quick. So there's a 62 million crit off a meteor with 1 stack. If I even had a stack. It's hard to tell, it's hard to tell because of 6-second cooldown, and also what you cast, when you cast it, refreshing. So, like I said, don't worry about it, just make sure that your stacks are up. And, well, shit, I guess I'm already done with the Rift. So that's pretty much the video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, I got some other gear that I'd like to try out, and then, or test out, and then I'll be making some variations on the TAL RASHA build itself. So keep an eye out for that. Also, I should have a Firebird build out here along with this video to show off that the changes with 2.2. So hopefully you'll check that out. And if you enjoyed any of my videos, make sure to like and or subscribe to Dread's Escape, and I will see you next time. Thanks a lot for watching.